What is going on, YouTube universe? Welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, and with another round of action in the books, it is time, ladies and gentlemen, to drop another installment of the round recap. If you're unfamiliar with what this type of video format is, the name suggests it all. We recap the round of football that went down on the previous weekend, looking at each game in particular, doing our votes for the MVP award similar to the Brownlow system, and we even now drop a team of the week as well, compiled of who I believed were the best players from that round in that particular position. It also serves as the perfect catalyst for discussions in the comment section down below and transitioning into social media as well, because we talk about each of the games that happened. We talk about some controversial moments. Maybe the umpiring was a little bit array. Maybe there was something that, had a player suspended or not suspended. Just conjecture and conversation can be created about talking about the footy. And that is what this is all about. Just having a reflection of the week that was, talking about it all, and then turning it over to you guys to have a discussion about it. Round 3 obviously saw Collingwood and Sydney take a back seat because of these early buys, and we'll get more into that when it comes to the structure of the ladder right now, because I think it is absolutely ludicrous to think how this season is shaped up on the ladder given this introduction of Round 0. And if you were familiar with the content that I put out here, you would know that I am very anti-Round 0, and I've given some suggestions in the past about how it can change to be implemented as a better format for all clubs, not just a handful. But for the games that we did have, some of them actually turned out to be some absolute belters. Kicking it off on Thursday night at the MCG, we had Essendon hosting Port Adelaide in a game where I had convinced myself Essendon could not win this, and I wasn't going against them on talent or form or anything like that. It was purely on their lack of a forward structure due to players traded like Jake Stringer, due to injuries like Peter Wright and Kyle Langford. I just thought they would struggle to find avenue for goal. And they probably did, given the fact that you look at the scoreline, because Essendon, while they did walk away with a 12-point win, kicked 9 goals 18 against Port Adelaide's 8 goals 12. Both teams incredibly inaccurate. Could have been a blowout either side, especially if Essendon had kicked straight, which again just blows my mind that they were able to find avenue to that extent to score versus Port Adelaide, who I think up forward they might be missing a couple of pieces, but I think they're a little bit more potent in their forward line versus Essendon. But this was a very spirited win. It was very ugly, very scrappy, but at the end of the day, you get the win. 4 points is 4 points. And this was on the back of performances of some very young kids that are still finding their feet at AFL level. I thought Nate Caddy presented well for Essendon around the ground. Isaac Kako might not be kicking all the goals that we saw him kick in the preseason, and, some people might have fallen into the trap of thinking that he's going to be at some live wire forward that's going to kick 3 to 4 goals a week. He doesn't have to do that when he has such finesse with his ball movement. And there was one particular moment late in the game, he manages to get the ball off of the half forward line, dukes around a player, and hits up, I think it was maybe Nate Caddy in the forward line. I'm not 100% certain on which player it was. It's kind of eluding me right now, but just to have the vision on the inside to hit up that kick was absolutely sensational. Everybody was talking about Al Hawley, the player that come in as the sub for Essendon, having almost immediate impact, really. His run and carry really helped set up Essendon in that last quarter. His run and carry, his use of the ball, it was absolutely electric, and he'll find his feet. Obviously, starting as a sub, he had limited minutes, but as time progresses, he'll find himself running off of that halfback flank quite comfortably and consistently. The older heads at Essendon played well, as you'd expect. Zach Merritt carried Essendon on his back like he does every week. Dylan Shiel played a brilliant game of football. Xavier Dersma was absolutely fantastic. There was just so much to love about Essendon collectively as a whole. And then you turn your attention to Port Adelaide, and I'm starting to throw question marks around in areas that I think are a little bit concerning. Connor Rozee was held accountable and put his worst output out for the year so far. He was really down on his efforts. Jason Horne-Francis looked incredibly disinterested. It was like he didn't want to be out there. He was walking behind play. If he wasn't getting involved in a play directly by trying to shark an easy ball, he was getting frustrated. It's not a good look, especially when fitness of players are being questioned. I definitely feel his fitness should be in the cannon, being loaded into the gun to be shot at, because when you've got somebody that's lacking the run behind the ball, not showing any enthusiasm, it's not a good look at all. And I can understand that out of necessity they've had to throw him up forward more often than probably they expected him to. I think a lot of people this year expected Horne-Francis to transition into a permanent mid-role, especially with Zach Butters not playing. But Port Adelaide, coming off of such a huge win against Richmond, should have carried a hell of a lot more momentum into this game than they did. It was almost like two completely different teams played in those retrospective rounds. They struggled to hit targets up forward. They weren't linking up with the play. They were fumbling the football. I don't know whether the MCG is a catalyst here, because we saw them a few weeks back against Collingwood gets absolutely dismantled down in Melbourne, and then they go home to Adelaide, find their feet, come back to Melbourne, get towed up again. And I mean, the scoreboard doesn't suggest that they got towed up, but if Essendon had kicked straight, this could have been 30, 40, 50 points in the way of Essendon, and that to me rings alarm bells. I made the call early this year that I thought Ken Hinkley wouldn't make it to the end of the season. Port Adelaide need to really break out of this slump of only being able to win in Adelaide and trying to find fixturing that can accommodate that, because we have seen fixturing in the past accommodate for them to have more games at home. They're going to need to win on the road, because for me, still, the pass mark for Port Adelaide is making a grand final. They can make prelims all they want, but they're becoming a meme by making it to a prelim and not being able to progress any further. Essendon, on the other hand, picking up their first win of the season, getting their season back on track. I don't know whether Essendon will be around that finals contention at the end of the year. I still have some opinions about that, but on the day, Essendon, despite the scoreboard, looked infinitely better than what Port Adelaide did, especially given Port Adelaide led this game for most of the game and just let it fumble straight out of their hands. Friday night at Marvel Stadium, we saw an absolute belter go down, and the Bulldogs have been featured in some very good contests this year. We saw them against Collingwood only last week in a close game, and taking on Carlton this week in a very close game as well, with the Bulldogs coming out victorious by 8 points. It was a game that really should have been tucked away from Carlton incredibly early. At quarter time, they led the Bulldogs 27-4. At halftime, it was 47-29. Still in the way of Carlton, they should have still been able to wrestle momentum. And then it was a game of a completely different half, because transitioning from halftime to three-quarter time, Carlton moved from 47-63, with the Bulldogs shifting from 29 to 61. And then obviously to finish the game, Carlton only managed to pile on 2 goals, with Western Bulldogs running out with 3 goals for. It was a game again where if either team had just found some continuity and accuracy, it would have held them in greater stead. There could have been a bigger margin by the Bulldogs. It could have been definitely a win for Carlton, and a lot of Carlton fans are starting to find a lot of frustration. They have had very winnable games to start this year off. They have played against Richmond in round 1, a game they should have won, and won comfortably, and they lost. They played against Hawthorn, a game that was very winnable, and they lost. Then they played against the Bulldogs, albeit a home game for Carlton at Marvel, which we don't see often, but a very winnable game given the outs for the Bulldogs. And they still lost, and I don't know where we can look at Carlton and try to point fingers. We know Nick Newman is missing from their defence, but is Nick Newman that crucial a piece that the defensive 50 for them is breaking down? Is the fact that Curnow and Harry Mackay are yet to play a game together for 2025 hindering their forward line, because they're able to lock down that one key forward, and the opposition then has another free defender that can really play loose and play interception? Carlton had Brody Kemp, who is known to be a defender, come out and kick 5 goals in this game. The most goals he's kicked in a game of football ever in his career. Then you've got Lewis Young, who's a defender, who comes in and kicks 2. 2 defenders kicking 7 of your 11 goals is concerning as a forward line to me. Then you turn your attention to the midfield group, and Patrick Cripps obviously carrying them on his back. Tom De Koning, one of the best ruckmen so far we have seen this year, also carrying this team on his back. Sam Walsh might have had 26 disposals in this game, but I think they were padded. They were very much convoluted disposals where they didn't make, much sense in the grand scheme of the game. He didn't have much impact with those. He did run at about 73% disposal efficiency, but I feel a lot of these disposals he got, the 26 of those being padded by 12 handballs, very, very much not the same player that we have seen win a Gary Ayres medal for being the best player in a final series. A best and fairest winner, an all-Australian contender. It's very hard to see, as I said, it's very hard to point where to go, because you've got all 3 aspects of the ground to have players that are playing their role. You've still got Wiedering still playing well in defence. You've still got, as I said, Patrick Cripps, Tom De Koning in the middle. Adam Chera is stepping it up this year. George Hewitt has been serviceable. They're getting their hands on the ball, but the impact isn't having that impact it should have. Patrick Cripps, for example, still packing his stats with a lot of touches when it comes to disposal numbers, but what he does with them I don't think is as effective as what we have seen in the past. This game in particular, he had 21 disposals, but he only had 135 metres gained, because of those 21, 16 of them were handballs. So he's getting the ball in tight, he's still feeding, but some of those aren't going the way he wants them to go. When you look at disposal efficiencies, he's not running at the best at all. He had, as I said, that 21, but of those 21, he only ran at 61% disposal efficiency, so very down on output from himself. On the flip side, you look at the Bulldogs, and the Bulldogs are performing at a level that I don't think many expected given their outs. No Marcus Bontempelli, who still many, regard as the best player in the competition. No Jamara Ugle-Hagan up forward, one of the best young key position players in the game. No Adam Treloar, who, aside from Liberatore, is probably number 2, if not guaranteed number 3 in the pecking order of this midfield. So you got 2 of your best midfielders, if not your best midfielders, out. You've got your best key forward out. You're kind of mixing pieces around, playing some younger kids through the mix, still finding your feet. You've just had an exodus of players like McRae and Daniel, walk out of the club. Bailey Smith, obviously, as well, going to Geelong. So a lot of people thought there was going to be a huge drop-off for the Bulldogs, and they have been proving a lot of people wrong. They are playing a good brand of football, a very defensively sound game of football. The players that are stepping up when needed is absolutely incredible. Like Sam Davidson, for example, plucked out of the draft from Richmond's VFL system last year, gets a crack this year in the first few games, and kind of set the world on fire a little bit in the preseason game, and we haven't seen that transition since. But he was one of the best players on field in this game. He should notch himself Brownlow votes. He had the most possessions of any player on the ground. He had 10 marks for the game, which is amongst the best. I think that might actually be, if not the most amount of marks taken for the game, which it was. As I said, 31 disposals. He laid a few tackles. He had 639 metres gained. The kid was absolutely elite. And with opportunity, with these players out that are missing through injury, these players need to step up, and they're doing it. Tom Liberatore leading the charge, 11 tackles. He was huge. Bailey Williams had 26 disposals. He found a way to get in and under. Riley Sanders was good. Sam Darcy took a little bit of time to ease into the game, but he got going, and when he got going, it was impressive. Aaron Norton did fuck all for the whole game, but kicked a goal when they needed him to kick a goal at the clutchest of moments. It was a incredibly well-rounded performance from the Western Bulldogs, given the fact that they were against the ropes early, and given the personnel that they are missing, you would have been amiss to think that they weren't going to come back from that. But they are looking good this year, and Carlton fans, especially Richmond Hawthorn Bulldogs Gorringe pulling their fucking hair out. The first of a few games on Saturday afternoon saw Melbourne hosting the Gold Coast at the MCG. And we saw Melbourne in round 2 come off of a 60-odd point loss to North Melbourne at Marvel Stadium. A lot of people wondering, if this was just a abnormality because they don't play as well at Marvel like some teams do. North Melbourne obviously know how to play that ground a lot better. But I think there is definitely something going on at Melbourne because they host Gold Coast, who historically don't play all that well at the MCG, and they lost this game by 58 points. Another 60-odd point loss. Close enough to it. Back-to-back weeks against clubs that they should have really beaten and beaten comfortably, given when you look at the list of players this Melbourne team has. Christian Petrarca, Clayton Oliver, Max Gawn, Stephen May comes back into the defensive line. They've got these younger kids like Chandler and Sparrow, and Harvey Langford played a really good game as someone who was drafted only this year. They've got a good crop of players, Melbourne. They're nothing to be scoffed at all. Gold Coast were coming off of the bye, so I don't know whether that afforded them, having that break. They've come back a little bit rejuvenized. This is part of the reason why I dislike round 0 and what it's done, because even though Gold Coast didn't play round 0, they're still in the bye structure, so they were able to have a bye, come back fresh, and they've absolutely monstered Melbourne at the MCG. We'll get to that again when it comes to the ladder, because the ladder is just so fucked up beyond belief. I don't understand. But Gold Coast are looking the goods. And I hate to say it, because I've got some opinions about Damien Hardwick, obviously, as a Richmond man, and, the poaching of Daniel Rioli and everything in the mix. But when he took over at the Gold Coast, he said he was only a few pieces away from putting together his first premiership team. They bring in Elliot Himmelberg as a forward. They bring in John Noble and Daniel Rioli off of the halfback flanks. They have hit the trade period rather well since Hardwick's gone up there. They've gone to the draft pretty strong as well. Leo Lombard obviously hurting his shoulder in the preseason, so he's not going to be able to be coming into this team until after the mid-season buys, but he'll have impact when he comes in. And obviously the star-studded talent they already have at the Gold Coast. Matty Rowell and Noah Anderson and Sam Flanders, Toot Miller. Jared Witts is really starting to come back into his own as a ruckman again. Ben King really looks like he could win a Coleman medal this year. They just look so clean and poised and composed with the ball, and it looks like the systems that Hardwick has wanted to implement has finally clicked. It doesn't always do so. It takes time to build chemistry and cohesiveness, but it definitely looks like Gold Coast has that now under wraps. And that's a scary prospect, because a lot of people didn't expect Gold Coast to be contending for finals. I definitely didn't this year, and they're so far setting a bit of a standard about how they've played, because both games they have played so far this year, yes, we're only, there's been effectively 4 rounds of football played up until this point in time. They've only played 2 games, so it's hard to gauge whether or not these are just, as I said, abnormalities, anomalies. Can they beat the teams that are going to be contending for finals or not? But they're one to watch. And it pains me to say it, but when they're on, they look impressive. Again, though, I don't know what it is with Melbourne. I don't think Simon Goodwin is going to be there next year. I've just got a gut feeling about that. I feel there is some things happening internally that is going to implode this club from the inside out. I think Christian Petrarca will be playing his last year at Melbourne. I think Clayton Oliver will be traded at the end of the year. Cozzy Pickett will end up going to Fremantle. We're going to see players leaving. They're going to hemorrhage a lot. They're going to lose games. They're going to lose a lot of respect from fans. They're going to lose their players at the end of the year. I think this is the year Melbourne proverbially, drops off the cliff. And they're driving the car, and the car goes off the cliff. You know what I'm saying? They're fucking going to plummet to their death, and it's their own fucking fault. Over at Marvel Stadium, we saw another smacking. St Kilda taking on Richmond. And at half-time, I, as a Richmond man, was incredibly happy. 8 points the way of St Kilda, and I really thought this game was winnable. I thought, yep, we're in a good spot here. The kids are up and about. Our senior players are actually showing a little bit of something here. And we proceeded to go and lose this game by 82 points. I expected losses like this year coming into the season. I didn't expect many wins at all. I think I maybe had us winning 2, maybe 3 games for the year. That's it. But I didn't expect this drop off after halftime. There were positional moves made, and I can understand Adam Uze wanting to do it. We are in a rebuild process. He wants to move pieces around. He wants to see what works and what doesn't work. And I respect him for doing it. And in the post-game conference, in the post-game presser, I am actually really happy with how he handled himself. He took accountability. He even said himself he wanted to make changes on the field to see where players were at and what he could do. In his position, with this team, I'm happy for him to do that. It's a lot different to what we were dealing with Damien Hardwick at the end of his tenure at the club. Whenever we would lose, it was always the same excuses. It was never taking accountability. It was always glazing over questions. At least Adam Uze is facing these questions head on, and as a senior coach wanting to lead this charge, couldn't ask for something better from somebody to be doing that. Some of the moves that I thought were great from Richmond, Camden McIntosh moving to a more tagging-based role over the last couple of weeks, I thought has been great. He really kept Jack McRae under wraps in that first half, and I feel that is a big reason as to why Richmond were in the game up until that point. Unfortunately, Camden McIntosh was shifted off of him after half-time. It was just terrible to see Jack McRae getting off the chain after McIntosh worked so fucking hard to shut him down. And we did see him then transition late in the game to Jack Sinclair, and he did keep Jack Sinclair a hell of a lot more accountable than what he was in the first 3 quarters. So McIntosh being reinvented and used as something different, love to see it. Nick Vlauston, somebody who I feel has been robbed of all Australians throughout his career, is one of the best intercepting defenders in the competition. Found himself playing in the forward 50 to give us a marking target because we didn't really have any down there. Again, good move to try that, but taking Vlauston out of our defence meant that we started hemorrhaging goals because there was nobody to intercept that ball. So the moves are being made and I can respect it, but some of the moves being made are leaving gaping holes that aren't able to be covered. And this is why I'm looking forward to young kids coming in and getting exposure. We've still got some coming through. Josh Smiley should get opportunity in the coming weeks to get his debut. Jasper Alga, I think if Ryan Mansell gets rubbed out for his 3-game suspension, which is, don't even fucking get me started on that, but Alga's in the wings ready to go. Rioli Jr. is coming back. Sam Banks is looking good to come back in a few weeks. Ralph Smith to come back as well. So we've got some young talent to come through, and I just want to see them get opportunity and make the best of it. That's, I think all Richmond supporters can really hang their hats on for the 2025, maybe 2026 season while we start to build upon this rebuild. But St Kilda, though, they looked fierce. We know that they build their game on defensive pressure and their intercepting abilities in that back 6, which we know has been weakened a little bit since Josh Battle has been plucked out of that back line. But Wilkie did a good enough job on Lynch to keep him incredibly quiet. Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira, again, off of half-back, absolutely incredible. As I mentioned, Jack Sinclair, fantastic. Forward of the ball, Machito Owens, just taking the piss. Kicks a goal of the year contender, or at least it was nominated this week. Marks a ball on a goal line and kicks one of the easiest goals he'll ever kick in his fucking life. It was just being made so easy. And once the floodgates opened and Richmond's morale dropped, St Kilda just put their foot on the throat and just kept going. And it was like the fucking meme from The Simpsons. You know what I'm talking about? This one.
He's already dead.
Pretty much sums up my sentiment on how I was feeling close to the end of the game. But Richmond dropping the ball severely in a game that they were really, competitive in for a half of football. And we can hang our hat on that. But it's just so disappointing to see such a great half of football played and then a severe drop-off. But if you're a St Kilda fan, you loved this from start to finish. I will touch on it slightly. I'm wanting to do a separate video on it, but there was an incident that involved Ryan Mansell with a St Kilda player. The name eludes me. It is a young kid. There was a jostling for position, or at least what I saw as a jostling for position, as a small forward, and as Eddie Betts has gone to say, one of, if not one of, the best small forwards to ever play the game, come out and said that a small forward's craft involves pushing off of the player and positioning yourself for the drop of the ball. Mansell's looking at the ball, ball's coming in, he turns to look at the player, pushes him in the side, not the back, but in the side, in hopes of getting distance between them, so if the ball drops to ground, Ryan Mansell's got first use. Obviously, his opponent eyes for the football, following the flight of the ball, a little bit of a nudge, straight bang into Tom Lynch, concussed out for the game. The AFL, after not making any movements on reporting or suspending players like Ruben Ginbey, Darcy Cameron, I can't remember who the player it was that harmed Brandon Starcevich, but he ended up concussed as well. There's been a handful of incidents. Even the tribunal recognised the fact that Jacob Wiedering did push Tom Lynch in that contest that saw Tom Lynch rubbed out for a week for head-high hit on Tom De Koning. They've made an example of Ryan Mansell and they reckon they're going to suspend him for 3 games. Richmond is contesting that, so it's going to be very interesting to see how that goes, because if they get Ryan Mansell off, that sets further precedent for anyone else who gets done this year to get off as well. What the AFL should have done was report and suspend Ruben Ginbey in the first place, and we wouldn't be having a fucking problem moving forward, but we'll save that for another video. Keep your eyes peeled for that. But St Kilda, huge win for them. Richmond, wallowing a little bit in self-pity, but again, I saw enough glimpses from some players to take a little bit of excitement out of what was a absolute thrashing. Hawthorn, GWS, Tasmania, both teams undefeated heading into this game. I thought this was going to be one of the games of the round, and it absolutely delivered. It was a game, again, that fell the wayside of 12 points. A lot of close games this round, apart from obviously Richmond getting absolutely towed and Melbourne taking it up the tailpipe from the Gold Coast. But this was a game that GWS had in the bag by quarter time, and I thought this is the team that is going to go on and win the premiership this year. They were making a believer out of me. To have Hawthorn, who has been playing incredible football, held to only 2 behinds at quarter time, up against the 5-7 that they kicked. 2-37, 35-point lead at quarter time. Turned into a quarter that only saw GWS kick 2 points, but saw Hawthorn rally 6-8. Half-time, the scoreline was 46-39. Hawthorn had the game in control, and then after that, it was just all the way to the races. And it was a game that in the last quarter, GWS had opportunities to bring the game back into their control, because at 3-quarter time, Hawthorn had managed to kick 10-12, but only kicked 4 behinds in the last quarter. GWS only kicked 2 goals in that last quarter. It was a game that they really could have and should have stolen, but it was a game they should have never dropped. A lot of conjecture out of this game, though. A lot of conjecture out of this game, because we saw some moments where marks were paid and free kicks were paid that should not have been, and the conversation point has now turned back to a hashtag that is very synonymous with this team. Free kick Hawthorn is a meme that was so up and about years ago. It looks like it's coming back into full force, because a player like Josh Weddle goes up and takes a mark that clearly gets dropped, bounces off the ground, and it comes back to his chest. Paid a mark, goal. Another mark played to Blake Hardwick, I think it was. All play had stopped. The umpire in question closest to the ball didn't even pay the mark. Hardwick himself was about to play on because the mark wasn't paid. But no, we're gonna pay that mark and we'll let you kick another goal. Start putting things together. They win by 2 goals. 2 goals they were handed by the umpires. So it's very confronting with the umpiring this year. There has been ups and downs. There has been some absolute blights. But this game in particular has a lot of people thinking that the umpires were riding the dicks of Hawthorn from start to finish. That being said, trying to take that out of the equation, I don't want to be pointing fingers at umpiring solely. To be 35 points down and come back to win by 12 and just wrestle all that momentum back that you were up against at the start of the game, got to commend them, especially a very young list. Hawthorn, at the moment, sitting undefeated on top of the ladder, are proving a lot of naysayers wrong. When they went into this season as premiership favourites, a lot of people laughed that off, but the style that they're playing, the quickness of the movement of the football, the solidification of that back six with Barras and Sicily and Battle, they're looking the goods. I honestly think they have it in them this year for a top 4 finish, locking in a second chance. And if they get that second chance and they keep playing this brand, who the fuck knows happens in September. Brisbane hosted Geelong up at the Gabba in a game that I was convinced Brisbane would crack wide open. But just like we have seen in all of their outings so far this year, they had an incredibly slow start, coughing up a 26 point lead to Geelong by half time. And I thought Geelong were just going to get into Geelong mode and they were going to get incredibly defensive, chip the ball around. They were going to wrestle momentum for a half of football. They didn't score in the third quarter and Brisbane brought it all the way back. They were leading by a point. Game on for the final quarter. Similar circumstances we saw Geelong in against St Kilda the week prior. Brisbane managing to get the job done. Geelong falling short 2 weeks in a row by under 10 points. Incredibly hard to lose those close contests, especially for a club like Geelong that is always in that finals premiership kind of conversation. Brisbane, though, even though they're coughing up these early leads, finding a way to grind it out. And they did it without the usual suspects. Lachie Neale was tagged heavily in this game, had little to no influence, but it allowed players like Hugh McCluggage and Will Ashcroft to step up. This is the depth that Brisbane are playing with, and it affords them so much opportunity. There was late outs for this game. Tom Stewart didn't play for Geelong, which I felt hampered them defensively, more so than the out for Brisbane. Brisbane had Oscar McInerney out and Darcy Fort played. A lot of people, when you compare the two, you would obviously like McInerney over Fort, but got to think about it. Fort is technically a premiership ruckman, so if he was good enough to win them a ruck contest and a premiership against somebody like Brodie Grundy, who on his day is incredibly competitive and bullish around the contest, I thought he did incredibly well. This was a very spirited comeback from Brisbane. It just, though, still leaves me a little bit weary about leaving these gaps open. There's going to be teams that are going to take advantage of those gaps and not let them creep back in. And I put it down to ring rust for Brisbane, obviously playing right up until the grand final, all the celebrations and everything that followed. They have a less of a pre-season than what, teams like Richmond, West Coast, all those bottom-dwelling teams have had. Even the teams that didn't make the finals, all the rest of the top 8. Everyone else collectively in the competition would have had a stronger, more beneficial pre-season than what Brisbane had, and that's similar to any other team that wins a premiership. Obviously, when Richmond won their premierships, I know that they came back a little bit later. They were still in celebration mode when they first came back in, so it's not always going to be a great start to a year for a reigning premier, especially in this day and age with the upsets and the level of competition that we're seeing. They're finding ways to get it done, but I don't know how long that is going to be afforded to them. If they're going to come up against teams like GWS or even Adelaide, all those other teams, Hawthorn, are they going to come up against these teams and leave the doors open enough for these players and teams to do damage against them, and it's going to be, inoperable, and they're not going to be able to come back from it? I don't know. Remains to be seen. But very spirited by Brisbane, especially some of the, I don't want to say B-graders, but kind of like the second-tier players, because you've got your Josh Dunkleys and your Zorkos and your Lachie Neales that are all your standouts, and then you've got the next tier below that, your Hugh McCluggage and your Will Ashcroft, who are great, but they aren't as recognised, I suppose, as other players. That's what I'm getting at there. Geelong, on the other hand, I don't know. They're finding ways, but they still look a little bit sloppy sometimes. Too many players trying to do too many things on their own. I don't know whether they fall into complacency. It's going to be an interesting watch for Geelong this year, because I actually had them playing off in the grand final. So, that being said, though, I had them playing off in the grand final against Carlton and Carlton winning, and Carlton haven't won a fucking game yet. So, my predictions this year could probably just get out the fucking window. Speaking of Adelaide, down at Adelaide Oval, they hosted North Melbourne, and I did say, given Adelaide's run, they would win this game comfortably. They ended up running out the tune of 36 points, but I thought North Melbourne still held their own, and I've used this term a few times over a few videos over the last couple of weeks, and that term is valiant in defeat. I don't like using it often because you're losing a game of football. I don't know whether you can be excited about losing, but when you're seeing so much promise and glimpses of greatness from young kids in your team, losing a game but still seeing those glimpses still gives you hope coming out of that. You know, being competitive for a full game of football, even though you're losing by 36 points, still holds you in great stead because you know you are heading in a forward direction. You don't have to have win after win after win to have forward progression. You know, you can lose games of football but still see movement happening, you know, things changing, things moving. And these young kids at North Melbourne are taking opportunity by the reins and running with it. Acquisitions like Luke Parker, Jack Darling, Caleb Daniel have held North Melbourne so far this year in great stead because they don't only have great leadership on the field, but these players are having impact on the field as well. Caleb Daniel, again, in a losing team, was very influential. Jack Darling up forward provides opportunity for Nick Larkey to present better because Jack Darling is having impact up there as well. A lot to like from North, but Adelaide, boy, they are looking good. I did say in my predictions video, even though I had them about 9th or 10th, that they could finish as high as 5th or 6th on the ladder. They are really firming this year, and I know we're only 3 or 4 games in, so it's still early crow. But with the style that they're playing, the brand that they're playing, the cohesiveness of the team, this is a team that has top 4 written on them. And a lot of people laughed at comments that I've made in the past that Adelaide would eventually be a top 4 team. They're starting to show it. They're drafting, they're trading, absolutely sensational. Similar to North. North obviously not getting the results, but their drafting and their trading has set them up for an incredibly cohesive and successful future. I can see that for North Melbourne. I can see them playing in a grand final in the future. Adelaide, however, they have drafted to the point where they've been kind of off the mark for a few years, but everything that they've brought together now is starting to really glue together. You know, having players like Riley Thilthorpe out injured, but working incredibly hard on himself, so by the time he comes back, he has meaningful impact. Rory Laird has been in the midfield for years for Adelaide, moves back to a more defensive inclined role and looks great back there when he is playing that defensive role. Jordan Dawson in the midfield going to another level. When it comes to captains in the competition, he does not get near enough recognition or talk about him. He has been incredible this year. Other players like, you know, the younger players, Jake Saligo, he's having a breakout year for me. Last year he was good. This year he's taking it to a whole new level. Isaac Rankin is showing why Adelaide targeted him as hard as they did. Gold Coast will be spewing they coughed him up. Isaac Rankin is sensational. He is a full package. I absolutely love him. He's one of my favourite players this year to watch outside of Richmond's walls. This is the 3rd game this year that Adelaide has posted over 100 points. Absolutely incredible. But I talk about these guys with something really stuck in the back of my head. When you look at the teams they have beaten, you can question whether or not this is something that is going to have continuity. Essendon, St Kilda, North Melbourne. 3 teams that a lot of people would not have had in the finals conversation this year. St Kilda have played well, but got soundly beaten by Adelaide. Essendon, beaten by Adelaide. North Melbourne beaten by Adelaide. This is a team that kicked 160 points, I think, not last week, but the week before. Within the last couple of weeks, Adelaide kicked 160 points. That is something that you don't see often in the modern game. This is a team that has reconfigured, reevaluated, and reassessed where they want to be and who they are as an entity, and have come out strong. But can they put in performances like this against a GWS, a Geelong, a Hawthorn, even a Collingwood? You know, if they can beat teams like that soundly, I will be convinced that there is no stopping this team from pushing for a top 4 finish this year, and maybe even a prelim final. That's a big call early, only after 3 rounds of football, but they look the goods, and of all the teams playing this year, they have been one of the most watchable. The final game of the round was the Western Derby. We had West Coast taking on Fremantle at Optus Stadium, and just like many derbies that we have seen in recent years, Fremantle won convincingly straight out the gates. There was no question about the fact that they were never going to lose this game. It was just a matter of how much they were going to win this game by, which has alarm bells ringing for me for West Coast, because I really felt West Coast were on the improve after last year, but I have myself looking at the fixture and wondering that maybe the only 2 wins they possibly notch up is the fact that they play Richmond twice late in the season. And if Richmond can get those scalps, West Coast could really go this year without a win, which would be huge, considering a lot of people said Richmond weren't going to win a game and had, West Coast winning 4 or 5 games. So I don't know whether they are, and I think it probably is, missing the key components like a Yo and a Sheed in the midfield. I believe he plays for Carlton. Jeremy McGovern, I think, got injured in this game. I'm not 100% sure. Obviously, there's a little bit of continuity lacking in certain positions, people playing elsewhere that they've never played before. Ryan Marrick, obviously, coming in as a forward, now playing a more defensively sound role. Minnie McQualter's come in, reset the club, brand new game plan, moving magnets around. It's always going to be hard in the first year. We saw that with Richmond and Uze last year, and we're kind of seeing that again this year. So with West Coast, they've basically, with bringing in a brand new coach, they've essentially undergone another rebuild, because they've thrown everything that they knew out the door and they're bringing in new things, and that's hard to implement straight away. You're not always going to click with the new coach straight up. Chemistry with new players coming in needs to be developed. So you can excuse West Coast, I feel, for maybe dropping a few games early in the year. But you'd think that as the year rolled on, they should be finding a little bit more continuity and cohesiveness. I just don't know where their first win comes from. As I said, it might be against Richmond. It might be until later in the year. But yeah, I think they've got a lot more to worry about than just the winning games and the margins of their losses, because when you've got players like Harley Reid, who gets beaten up in the media about being a generational talent and could be the first $2 million a year player on multi-year contracts, and every club wants to get a hold of him, when he's more concerned about wanting to start Spitfires and start little fights and scraps around the field instead of getting a hard ball and earning a disposal, I think you'd be a little bit more hard-pressed to be pulling him in behind closed doors and getting stuck into him. And, he's only a young kid, okay, fair enough, but you develop habits early. And if he starts to develop a habit and an attitude of wanting to go the player instead of the ball, it's going to ruin his career early, because it's something that he's not going to be able to get out of. He'll become a thug. A lot of players we know from history have developed that kind of, persona about them. It's a shame, because Harley Reid has so much talent, but he chooses not to use it. He picks and chooses. He'll show a little bit of a defensive maneuver, a little bit of a stiff arm here and there, or might do a little bit of a pirouette with the ball and duck around a player, and he might kick a good goal, he might take a great mark. But when he's not doing that shit, he's doing fuck all else instead of giving fingers to the crowd and all this stuff, and really trying to label himself the bad boy of AFL. I don't know whether it's ego. I think it's definitely ego. A lot of people are saying to stop piling on this kid, but the more the media beats him up, this bigger ego is going to be built. And until we stop kind of recognizing all this shit, maybe it'll simmer down a little bit and he'll start focusing on his football. I don't know, but I know there's a lot of West Coast supporters that are actually at this point in time happy to see him go. Fremantle, though, picking up their first win. They've been a little bit hard-nosed early this year, losing a couple of close games, but obviously the Geelong game wasn't fucking close at all. But they are a team that I really thought would push top 8, top 4 this year. They've been a ways off the mark, but they've had players standing up tall every week, and it's just great to see them get reward for effort. Caleb Sarong wins his 4th best on ground for the derby in 5 years. The only other Fremantle player to ever do that was Hazelby, so he is in good company, Sarong. And Sarong's only 24 years old. It's incredible to think how young these midfielders at Fremantle truly are, and the talent that they possess. Luke Jackson in the ruck, absolutely off the chain. I think they finally recognised at Fremantle, hey, we don't need Sean Darcy, because Luke Jackson, he's the ruckman we've been looking for. Shea Bolton definitely does complement this team, Jai a miss. Comes out, kicks 4. Tracy's kick 3. So we're getting some forward cohesiveness from the big boys. Isaiah Dudley, debut for Fremantle. Kicks 2 goals in the crowd. So emotional to see his family crying and hugging each other and seeing a young Indigenous boy get opportunity to live his dream and take that opportunity and run with it was great. Murphy Reed showing that he might have been one of these steals of the draft given how late he got picked up in those late teens. Should have definitely, comparatively to the output we have seen from other draftees, gone top 10. Easily a top 10 pick. He's going to be an absolute star. Fremantle are setting themselves up strong. This might give them the momentum they're looking for. They can really turn their fortunes here, I feel. They've got very winnable games coming up, and they should start stringing some wins together, building upon that, and when the purple haze gets rolling, could be very hard to stop. And with that, this is how our ladder shapes up after 3 rounds of football. Well, 4 if you count round 0. And this is where confusion starts to set in. Hawthorn are in first place, playing 4 games, all 4 rounds, including round 0, undefeated, 16 points. You've then got Adelaide and Brisbane, both undefeated, having played 3 games on 12 points. And then you've got the Gold Coast, who are undefeated, but have only played 2 games in 4th. I don't know how you can have first place has played 4 games, 4th place has played 2 games. They need to scrap round 0 completely because this ladder is thrown completely out of whack. It is something traditionally that we have held close to our hearts as AFL fans for so fucking long. And to just see disparities like this, it's only shit that you see in Americanized games like the NFL and soccer, and especially European soccer. So I don't want to see the AFL going down that pathway, even though I feel there's many things that they're trying to shove down that pathway. You know what I'm saying? It's just, I don't know, it's so hard to work out. And you think about it, Hawthorn have played 4 games in a row. They got their bye this week, so they're going to be able to sit fresh after an undefeated thing. They have a break. They come back round 5 off of a break to continue running that streak. The Gold Coast had their first win, had a break, come against Melbourne this week, absolutely smashed them. They're undefeated. They are getting opportunities that other clubs aren't afforded early in the year, and it is going to cause so much disparity on the ladder when certain teams are getting more buys than others and more breaks and coming out fresh. It's going to be a clusterfuck. I'm telling you that much. But that's our top 4. Hawthorn, Adelaide, Brisbane, Gold Coast. If you had told me after 4 rounds of football that is how we were going to look, would have told you you're fucking crazy. From 5 to 8, we have GWS in 5th, Collingwood in 6th, St Kilda in 7th, and Western Bulldogs in 8th. That is our top 8. We then have Geelong in 9th, North Melbourne in 10th, Sydney in 11th, Port Adelaide in 12th, Fremantle in 13th, and Essendon in 14th, with our bottom 4 being Richmond in 15th, and then the following 3 teams yet to win a game this year, with Carlton in 16th, Melbourne in 17th, and West Coast Eagles last in 18th place. Now it's time for a little bit of fun. We get to dive into the team of the week as well as my MVP votes for round 3. If you haven't caught one of these videos before, when it comes to the MVP votes, I hand it out like the 3-2-1 Brownlow system. 1 vote obviously being 3rd best on ground, and then 3 votes being essentially what it can be referred to as best on ground, man of the match, however you see fit. At the end of the year, whoever's got the most amount of votes is effectively the MVP winner. And I do this not for hopes that the players are going to see it, because it's a very fucking minimal percentage that any AFL player is ever going to see any content I put out, right? Let's get serious. I do this for the love of the game, for my passion for the game, to cause conversation points and discussion points with you guys at home. I just want to find avenues that we can be more interactive and playful with the content that I put out here and be able to have a chat about it. So that's what it's all about. So we're going to kick off, as the previous videos have, with the votes, and then peel into my team of the week, which is a new thing I've started this season, because when it comes to the votes, I feel sometimes I'm a little bit harsh on players that could have gotten votes but miss out. So the team of the week just gives me opportunity to maybe find spots for players that might not have gotten votes, but I can slot them in given the roles that they played in the positions that they played. So With that being said, Hip and Shoulder MVP 2025, we are kicking off with the first game of the round, which was Essendon versus Port Adelaide, and the one vote I gave to Xavier Dersma. 29 disposals, broken down to 13 kicks and 16 handballs, 8 marks, 3 tackles, 4 clearances, 224 metres gained, and 10 score involvements. One of the better wingmen over the entire competition for the round. The 2 vote goes to Dylan Shiel. 25 disposals, broken down into 15 kicks and 10 handballs, 5 marks, 5 tackles, 5 clearances, 709 metres gained, and 8 score involvements, with best on ground being Zach Merritt. 34 disposals, 15 kicks and 19 handballs, 5 marks, 2 tackles, 1 clearance, 477 metres gained, and 8 score involvements. Carlton versus the Western Bulldogs. 1 vote, Brody Kemp. 12 disposals, 10 kicks and 2 handballs, 7 marks, 4 tackles, 315 metres gained, 5 goals and 8 score involvements. For a defender to turn forward and kick 5 goals in a contest like this, huge. The 2 vote goes to Sam Davidson in his debut year. 31 disposals, the most of any player on the ground, 20 kicks and 11 handballs, 10 marks, 3 tackles, 2 clearances, 639 metres gained and 7 score involvements. And best on ground, acting captain Tom Liberatore. 30 disposals, 17 kicks and 13 handballs, 6 marks, 11 tackles, 5 clearances, 489 metres gained, 1 goal and 7 score involvements. Melbourne versus Gold Coast. 1 vote, Ben King. 12 disposals, 9 kicks and 3 handballs, 4 marks, 2 tackles, 148 metres gained, 4 goals, 3, and 9 score involvements. My current favourite for the Coleman. 2 votes, Noah Anderson. 35 disposals, 14 kicks and 21 handballs, 3 marks, 4 tackles, 3 clearances, 503 metres gained, 1 goal, and 10 score involvements. And 3 votes, Matt Rowell. 36 disposals, 15 kicks, 21 handballs, 5 marks, 7 tackles, 13 clearances, 396 metres gained, and 9 score involvements. St Kilda versus Richmond. 1 vote, Jack McRae. 31 disposals, 15 kicks, 16 handballs, 4 marks, 6 tackles, 9 clearances, 312 metres gained, 12 score involvements. 2 votes, Nasiah Wanganeen Malira. 29 disposals, 21 kicks, 8 handballs, 7 marks, 3 tackles, 517 metres gained, and 9 score involvements. And 3 votes, Jack Sinclair. 40 disposals, which is a career high. 28 kicks, 12 handballs, 7 marks, 1 tackle, 1 clearance, 689 metres gained, and 10 score involvements. Hawthorn versus GWS. 1 vote, Nick Watson. 21 disposals, 10 kicks, 11 handballs, 2 marks, 5 tackles, 427 metres gained, 1 goal, and 9 score involvements. 2 votes, Lockie Whitfield. 34 disposals, 25 kicks, 9 handballs, 7 marks, 2 tackles, 666 metres gained, and 4 score involvements. And 3 votes, Cam McKenzie. 30 disposals, 12 kicks and 18 handballs, 4 marks, 5 tackles, 5 clearances, 261 metres gained, and 8 score involvements. Brisbane versus Geelong. 1 vote, Hugh McCluggage. 30 disposals, 17 kicks and 13 handballs, 4 marks, 8 tackles, 6 clearances, 517 metres gained, 8 score involvements. 2 votes, Dane Zorko. 28 disposals, 23 kicks, 5 handballs, 7 marks, 4 tackles, 5 clearances, 834 metres gained, 1 goal, and 5 score involvements. With 3 votes going to Will Ashcroft. 33 disposals, 11 kicks, 22 handballs, 6 marks, 3 tackles, 5 clearances, 151 metres gained, 1 goal, and 8 score involvements. Adelaide versus North Melbourne. 1 vote, Jake Saligo. 28 disposals, 19 kicks and 9 handballs, 5 marks, 5 tackles, 6 clearances, 502 metres gained, 1 goal, and 8 score involvements. 2 votes, Isaac Rankin, 30 disposals, 18 kicks and 12 handballs, 5 marks, 5 tackles, 8 clearances, 541 metres gained, and 7 score involvements. With best on ground, 3 votes going to Rory Laird, 32 disposals, 12 kicks, 20 handballs, 7 marks, 2 tackles, 3 clearances, 101 metres gained, 4 score involvements. West Coast versus Fremantle. 1 vote, Nathan O'Driscoll, 22 disposals, 15 kicks, 7 handballs, 4 marks, 6 tackles, 5 clearances, 360 metres gained, and 5 score involvements. 2 votes, Andrew Brayshaw, 29 disposals, 17 kicks, 12 handballs, 1 mark, 7 tackles, 6 clearances, 696 metres gained, and 11 score involvements. With Caleb Sarong getting 3 votes and best on ground, 35 disposals, 18 kicks, 17 handballs, 2 marks, 1 tackle, 10 clearances, 498 metres gained, and 4 score involvements. And after effectively 4 rounds of football, we do have an outright leader. In 3rd place, tied on 4 votes, we have Jordan Dawson from Adelaide, Jai Newcomb from Hawthorn, Zach Merritt from Essendon, and Jack McRae from St Kilda. In 2nd place, on 5 votes, we have Connor Rosey from Port Adelaide, Tom Liberatore from the Western Bulldogs, Matt Rowell and Noah Anderson from the Gold Coast, and Isaac Rankin from Adelaide. And in outright first on 6 votes, 1 vote ahead of the pack, is Dane Zorko from Brisbane. And to wrap things up, it is now time for the Team of the Week. Again, based upon objective and personal opinion, so decisions I make with giving out votes and who makes the Team of the Week are always going to be based upon how I'm feeling. So if you agree, if you disagree, feel free to sound off in the comment section down below. But this is how the Team of the Week looks after round 3. In the back line, we have Dane Zorko and Lockie Whitfield in the back pockets with Sam Taylor at full back. Across halfback, we have Jack Sinclair and Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira on the halfback flanks, and Harris Andrews at centre halfback. On the wings, we have Xavier Dersma and Sam Davidson, with Matt Rowell in the centre. Across half forward, we have Isaac Rankin and Zach Merritt on the half forward flanks, and Jai Amiss at centre half forward. In the forward pockets, we have Brody Kemp and Mitch Owens, with Ben King at full forward. Tom De Koning takes the ruck with Caleb Sarong and Tom Liberatore as ruck rover and rover. On the interchange, we have Jack McRae, Will Ashcroft, Noah Anderson, and Hugh McCluggage. Cam McKenzie is our sub for round 3, and coach of the round with the huge win over Richmond was Ross Lyon. And that is the round officially recapped, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me for another video. I do hope you appreciate these videos that I do make, because these ones in particular take a very long time to piece together. So I do appreciate you guys turning out and supporting what I do. If you'd like to support myself further, consider hitting that like button down below and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already to join the community that we're building here. It's all about having a safe space for passionate and loving AFL supporters. Get on board, let's have some banter in the comments, let's have a good time, and let's build this community to bigger and greater heights. Thank you again for joining me. Do hope you enjoyed. I think I've already said that, but I'll say it again anyway. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.